Hey, good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here with your off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. It is Monday, the 29th day of March 2021, and things are certainly looking a lot better this March 29th than they were a year ago and certainly a week ago. Boy, I tell you, this week, as the headline says, is going to be a lot quieter than what we saw last week. And as I alluded to, this is a much better looking end of the month of March than we were facing a year ago. Boy, it's amazing how things have changed. Hopefully, this positivity, the positive outlook on things will continue, especially as we get deeper into severe weather season and eventually hurricane season. The more we can focus on weather, the better. But that's just me. I'm biased. I like weather, and all the other stuff can just go away. All right, well, let's get on with it. That being said, and we'll take a look at the Southern Oscillation Index, a good literal and figurative barometer here of measuring. I mean, that's literally what it is. It's the pressure tendencies between Darwin, and that's in Australia, of course, and Tahiti, and the differences between those two readings gives you the SOI, the Southern Oscillation Index, and the 30-day average now at just a very weak negative state at negative 0.47, so it's not quite a half, it's not even a degree, it's just a unit. So it's just slightly below the long-term average, but the 90-day is still a rather respectable positive 9, so the La Niña pattern is still firmly entrenched, and today's contributor is a measly 0.62. You can look at the trend lines here on the graph. There's been a slow decline overall, as the pattern's changing to less La Niña and airplanes flying over, and more towards neutral. And we can see that reflected in the sea surface temperature chart here. It's not quite as chilly relative to average out through this area, but make no mistake, the La Niña state, or what we call the state of the ENSO, El Niño Southern Oscillation, ENSO, is still very much in the La Niña realm. The atmosphere and the ocean are generally coupled together, and the pattern of the globe that we're seeing is going to favor a continued La Niña state. It's just not going to be quite as robust. You can't keep things in a static mode in terms of the weather or even climate. The climate's always changing, right? And so the weather's always changing, even in these shorter terms of a month to 3 months to 6 months. We're still in La Niña, it's just not quite as robust as it was. And on the flip side of that, looking in the Atlantic, wow, pretty warm here in the southwest Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico relative to average. A little bit of a cooling off out here in the eastern Atlantic, but by and large, the Atlantic basin warmer than it should be overall, or at least, I mean, who's to say what it should be, but the long-term average, and the Pacific all the way up here to the North Pacific off the coast of California. And notice too, while I'm at it, let's just zoom in here and look at the Gulf of California. Look right through here. I'll highlight it in yellow just to make it even more pronounced. Yikes. I mean, when have I ever seen the Gulf of California and the area around the Baja that cold relative to average? We're only a little over a month away from the eastern Pacific hurricane season climatologically getting its start, and those water temperatures running quite a bit colder than they should be. The only positive anomalies are down here. Let's just use black there to outline it, in the extreme southeastern Pacific, but these are just, nothing, just slightly above the long-term average. But that's just a very cold look to the Pacific. Lots of sinking air out here, dry air, and unless we see some pretty big changes, it's going to be tough to get a strong monsoon season out in the desert southwest. But things can change, and it's not just the Pacific that drives monsoon moisture. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but nevertheless, this is an interesting look that we're overall chilly in the Pacific, warm in the Atlantic relative to average, and we're not too far away from the start of the hurricane season for both basins. Just a few weeks off when you think about it, a little over a month and a half or so. And it won't surprise me at all if we get development in the Atlantic Basin in the month of May once again. We just seem to be leaning in that direction. And one of the reasons why I think that might happen again this year, if we look at the Gulf of Mexico, these are the actual temperatures in degrees Celsius. There's the 26 Celsius line right there. And that's about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 79.5, 80, something like that. So there's a pretty sizable area of the Gulf now that's warmed up enough to sustain tropical cyclone development. There's 27 Celsius right there. So, we're getting there. It's warming up a little bit if you've got vacation plans to Cancun or Cozumel or the Florida Keys, or anywhere, the Bay of Campeche, Merida, and vicinity along the southern Bay of Campeche here, southwestern Bay. Yup, water temperature is nice and toasty, but if you're going to go along the Gulf Coast of the U.S. up here, still a little chilly, at least for me. Water temperatures in the 60s for the most part, mid to upper 60s. But if we go back to the anomaly map, that being said, that they're kind of chilly, all of this is generally above normal. There's just a couple pockets in here of negative anomalies, but everything else is positive, and strongly so right here, especially in the eastern and central Gulf. So don't be surprised with all of this warm water relative to average kind of hanging out here in the western part of the Atlantic Basin, that we see development in the month of May. All that latent heat starting to get trapped and congregated there. All it's going to take is some kind of an impulse, a trough split where you leave some energy behind, or maybe an early tropical wave, and maybe even eventually the monsoon trough and the Central American gyre gets set up down here. We'll see. Still only about 6 weeks away. Then we really have to start watching that. So there's the Gulf. Here's the western Atlantic and the mid-Atlantic states, the Northeast. Very cold water temperatures up here, 6, 7, 8 degrees Celsius. Obviously, they're colder because they're farther to the north, but down here to the south, water temperatures steadily coming up. Still a bit early to be heading to the beach, in my opinion. You get that cold water just offshore there, any onshore flow, and your beach day is pooched, because trust me, when you get that easterly to northeast wind, it may be 80 degrees like it was here yesterday in Wilmington where I am, but you go down to Wrightsville Beach, and any onshore flow that you get blows that cold, moderated air off of the Atlantic. Relatively speaking, it's cold, and it gets real chilly right along the beachfront. We still have a few weeks until water temperatures warm up enough so that even at the beach, it's still nice and warm. That's coming, though, and I can't wait. I like going to the beach. It's fun. Take the kids down there and enjoy the beautiful coast of our area. All right, leaving the tropics, mostly. We do have a satellite animation here that covers part of the tropics. Just generally a quiet pattern over the next several days. And if we look down in the tropics, let's use sky blue for the pointer this time, the telestration. Pretty good trade winds blowing through the Caribbean in the lower levels. In the upper levels, you can see stronger upper level winds blowing these cloud tops away, stretching it out like cotton candy. We call that wind shear, or directional shear, that the wind direction is changing with height. Here at the surface, winds are coming in, 5,000 feet or so from the east towards the west, and in the upper levels coming out of the Pacific, they're blowing southwest to northeast. And that is not conducive to get any kind of convection to sustain and organize. That's why we usually don't see tropical cyclones this time of year. So that's good news. But if you're traveling down to the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, the islands of the Caribbean proper, windwards, leewards, whatever, random showers, maybe a couple thunderstorms here and there, but nothing organized. It's still kind of your dry season. And we'll be looking for tropical wave activity really once we get to the month of May and beyond. But that's coming up. We're almost done with March. And next up, of course, is April. All right, Mark knows his calendar. Looking at lower 48 weather now. Boy, this is nice to see. Generally clear skies across much of the contiguous 48 states. And Alaska and Hawaii, well, they're not on this map, sorry. But at least the lower 48, nice. Not to exclude our friends in Alaska or Hawaii, but the lower 48 nice and calm this week compared to what we've seen. We did have a cold front that came through yesterday. Finally brought some pollen ending, at least temporarily, rain for my area of southeast North Carolina. Boy, the pollen has been terrible this year, much more pronounced than I can remember, but at least this frontal passage washed some of that away, at least for the next few days until it resurges. So if you've got any travel plans over the next few days, no major weather problems brewing, no severe weather events like we saw last week, and last week was enough. But what you don't see back on this in terms of cloudy, stormy, whatever, you have to look at this and say, well, what the heck is all that pink and brown? You know, if we go back to the satellite animation, this may be good news for thunderstorms, severe weather, tornadoes, flooding, that kind of stuff, but this can be problematic for another hazard, and that's what we'll get to here, and that would be sort of your fire weather, or red flag warning is what they have posted here, the Weather Service. You also have high wind warnings, high wind watch, wind advisories. Some of that's covering up here in the Northeast. But this could be problematic. You could get some grass fires out here. Temperatures are going to be warming up. But the main thing is the low relative humidities across this area. So keep that in mind. And then any of these little green speckled areas you see through here in the southeast. Boy, Nashville and vicinity with all the flooding they had. Yep, some of the rivers are up. So again, go to weather.gov, weather.gov, put in your zip code if you want to know what's happening in your local area, any river flood warnings, or some of these fire weather dangers, the red flag warnings, etc., across the nation's plains. Be mindful of that. If you smoke and you throw the cigarette out the window, that could be a problem. Start a big old grass fire, and even parking your vehicle along the road. You pull over and maybe you want to get a picture of some beautiful skies or something. The bottom part of your vehicle could light the grass on fire, those dry grasslands. Weather is weather. It doesn't have to be thunderstorms and hurricanes and tornadoes to be problematic. Even a nice, dry, windy day can cause issues. And if we look ahead, this is the sixth today? Nope, that's not a word, Mark. Let's try again. The 6 to 10 day temperature probability outlook. This is from Pivotal Weather's site. They just map the data. This is not their outlook. Pivotal Weather does a great job of creating these thematic maps, like we see at Tropical Tidbits or Weather Nerds and all sorts of other sites. I just have subscribed to Pivotal Weather in the last couple of weeks, checking out some of their graphics, and it's nice to be able to navigate these. And as you can see, trying to make me go away, in the nation's heartland, above normal temperatures are very likely over the next 6 to 10 days or so, with the edges of the country likely to see below average temperatures. The western part of the U.S., the eastern part of the U.S., fake spring came and went. Now we're back into a little bit of a winter pattern. Cold temperatures, but you know what? It's much more short-lived this time of year. And you can see that because at the 8 to 14 day outlook, yes, temperatures start to warm up again across much of the eastern U.S., especially the heartland. And then it stays kind of chilly out west with some stormy conditions there, perhaps, as we go forward. Looking at the precip, dry, and that can be a problem. It really can. Good for the east, though, because we can dry out from all this rain and severe weather that we've had. But dry weather does lead to drought problems, wildfire dangers, grassland fire, that kind of stuff. But moving out 8 to 14, it starts to change a little bit. And again, I'm curious to see how this pans out through here. Let's use yellow. Because this is a signal in days 8 to 14 that Tornado Alley, the traditional Tornado Alley there in the nation's midsection, from Texas north to the Canadian border, North Dakota, right? We might get more active in the 8 to 14 day time frame for severe weather. But interestingly enough, the next 2 weeks looks relatively dry over the east, at least no excessive amounts of precip seen in the foreseeable future. Looking at the different panels here for severe weather, this is from the Storm Prediction Center, again interpreted at Pivotal Weather's mapping system. No organized severe weather, just marginal threats over the next few days. Today it's the Florida Peninsula. I'll draw your attention right there. Tomorrow, parts of the deep south again, but just a marginal, low-end probability overall. No large areas of severe weather expected, no violent tornadoes. This doesn't mean you can't have hail, high wind, and an isolated tornado. It's just not nearly as widespread, concentrated, or problematic as we saw last week. And then on Wednesday, as another front comes down, which will usher in some cold, dry air behind it, Wednesday will be a little bit more active here across the southeast. And we may see this get upgraded by Wednesday to a slight risk in some of this area. We'll see about that. But for the most part, the next 8 days should feature a much calmer weather pattern for the lower 48. Obviously, no tropical troubles to worry about. We're not there yet. So that's good. We can take some time off and not worry about weather for the time being. All right, so that being said, I am going to take the next week or so off. I'll still be working on stuff, but no update next week unless something pops up that we really need to talk about. I'm going to take some time, go on a family vacation, hang out with them. It's their spring break for my kids out of school. And since this year is looking better than we were seeing last year, we're able to travel a little bit. So we're going to do that and enjoy some time together, because after that, it's travel time for me related to work. I'm going to Orlando in April. I will be going down to the Mississippi and Louisiana coast in April to do all kinds of work on back-end stuff for our video production, field cameras, you name it. The things we're doing with our crowdfunding with Patreon. A lot of incredible stuff in the works. Got to do interviews and get stuff ready for the season 2 of the Hurricane Highway. And then after that, it'll be May. April's going to go by very fast, you'll see. And then May, we will be on the lookout for that opportunity to test all of our equipment in the nation's midsection. We don't know when that's going to be. We're going to let the pattern dictate it. In fact, go back to this outlook here, Storm Prediction Center. Once we see, for example, in May, the days 6, 7, and 8 start to fill in with the potential for something to come up, like a multi-day outbreak, that's when the team and I will be heading out to the Great Plains to set up our equipment for a big test. Not tornado chasing, but more testing the equipment. We're really looking forward to that. That'll be coming up before you know it. Just about a month away. Who knows? It might even be towards the end of April, once we see that pattern come into play, that we can take all this equipment out there. We got 20 live cameras to test, 20 of them this year, all of it crowdfunded. All these new Kestrel instruments, anemometers, pressure sensors, the weather balloon, a lot of stuff to get ready. And we've only got a couple months to go, and then it's officially hurricane season in the Atlantic Basin. So there's a lot to do between now and then. All right. Well, you're caught up for now, at least from my perspective. Don't forget, I'm on Twitter at HurricaneTrack. That's the brand. YouTube, subscribe, like, share, all that good stuff. And really, on the YouTube, if you're a subscriber and you want to get these updates regularly, make sure you select notifications, however that is, if it's the bell or whatever. You get a push notification that HurricaneTrack has uploaded a new video. If you want to know about it, you got to tell YouTube. And it goes for Twitter too, follow on Twitter. We are on Facebook, and that pretty much covers it. Everything else, I just don't have time for it. So we cover the big three: Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. And we are crowdfunded through Patreon. Join that movement if you like, if you can support it. You get a lot of great things in return. This great community that we're putting together, patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. And it, by the way, includes the exclusive podcast series, Stories from the Hurricane Highway. That's available to all of our patrons, not available anywhere else. It's not outside of the Patreon universe. So that's one of the many benefits that you get there. All right, well, enjoy the quiet week ahead. Again, I'll be off next week, and I'll come back in the first part of the second week of April. 2 weeks from today, I'll be back, and maybe later in the following week. We'll see. We do have Phil Klotzbach's update coming out in early April, so I might want to go over that. But over the next week or so, you bet I'm going to take some time off with the family, and I'm going to enjoy it because it's going to be a busy year after that. All right, now I'm going to sign off. You guys have a great rest of your week. Thanks, as always, for giving me a little bit of your time. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. We'll talk again sometime in early April.